The cabin stood near Pine Hollow Lake, quiet and steady like it had been waiting for someone who truly cared. Tall trees surrounded it on all sides, their leaves moving slowly with the mountain wind. The air smelled clean, and the water reflected the sky like a calm mirror. For Mark, this place was not just wood and land. It was peace. Mark worked in the city all week. His days were long and tiring. Phones rang, people talked non-stop, and every moment felt rushed. When Friday came, he packed his bag and drove for hours just to reach the cabin. Each mile away from the city made his shoulders feel lighter. He bought the cabin after saving money for many years. It was not big, and it was not fancy, but it was his. He read every paper carefully before signing anything. He followed every rule of the community. He paid his fees on time and never caused trouble. He wanted a quiet place, not problems. The cabin belonged to a small mountain neighborhood. There was a homeowners group that managed shared roads and basic rules. Mark never had issues with them. He believed rules were fine when they were fair and clear. Most weekends passed without trouble. People waved politely and kept to themselves. That changed on one spring weekend. Mark arrived at the cabin late Friday afternoon. The sun was low, painting the lake in soft orange light. He stepped out of his car and took a deep breath. The silence felt warm. No noise, no stress, only nature. He opened the trunk and began carrying his bags inside. The wooden porch creaked under his steps. Just as he reached for the door, he heard sharp footsteps behind him. "Hey," a voice said loudly. Mark turned around. A woman stood on the gravel path with her arms crossed. She looked confident and impatient at the same time. "Yes," Mark said calmly. "I'm Linda," she said. "What are you doing here?" Mark was surprised by the tone. "I'm staying at my cabin." Linda looked around like she owned the place. "This cabin is booked for my weekend. I always stay here." Mark stayed polite. "I think there is a mistake. I own this cabin." Linda's face tightened. "No, you don't understand. I have been using this cabin for years. Everyone knows that." Mark shook his head slowly. "I bought it last year. I have the papers." Linda laughed, but there was no humor in it. Paper does not matter when community rules apply. Mark felt uneasy but stayed calm. "I follow the rules. Ownership is clear." Linda stepped closer. "You must be new. I help run the homeowners group. I decide what happens around here." Mark looked at her carefully. He had read the rules himself. Nothing she said matched what he knew. "Even if that were true, you cannot take my property." Linda's voice grew sharper. "You are being difficult." "I am being honest," Mark replied. Linda stared at him for a long moment. "You should leave before this becomes a bigger issue." Mark stood straight. "I am not leaving my cabin." Her lips pressed into a thin line. Without another word, she turned and walked away. Mark watched her go, feeling confused and uneasy. He had expected peace, not conflict. Still, he tried to relax. He unpacked, made a simple meal, and sat on the porch watching the lake darken as night arrived. The stars came out one by one. Normally, this was his favorite moment. That night, his thoughts kept drifting back to Linda. Something about her behavior felt wrong. Later that evening, lights appeared on the road. A car stopped near the cabin. Mark's chest tightened as two officers stepped out. Linda followed behind them, looking confident. One officer spoke calmly. "Sir, we received a call about someone refusing to leave private property." Linda spoke quickly. "He is trespassing. This cabin is reserved for residents during special weekends." Mark took a breath. "I own this cabin." The officer asked, "Do you have proof?" Mark went inside and returned with his folder. He handed over the documents without rushing. The officers read carefully. One nodded and returned the papers. "Everything is clear." This cabin belongs to you. Linda's face turned red. That is impossible. It is not, the officer said. There is no rule supporting your claim. Linda raised her voice. He is breaking community rules. There is no violation, the officer replied. Calling us without cause is serious. Linda went silent. She turned and walked away without another word. As the officers left, one looked back at Mark. If this happens again, call us. Mark thanked them. When the road grew quiet again, he sat on the porch alone. The night felt colder now. He looked at the trees and the dark water. He came here for peace, but something told him this was only the start. Linda was not the kind of person who accepted losing, and she would not stop easily. Morning came slowly to Pine Hollow Lake. Soft light moved through the trees and touched the cabin roof. Birds began to sing, and the water stayed calm, as if nothing bad had happened the night before. For a moment, Mark almost believed it. He woke early and stepped outside with a cup of coffee. The air was cool and fresh. This was the reason he bought the cabin. Quiet mornings, clear thoughts. But today, peace felt fragile. As Mark walked down to the edge of the lake, he noticed movement near the main road. A group of neighbors stood together, talking in low voices. When they saw him, the talking stopped. Mark nodded politely and kept walking. He did not like attention. Still, he could feel eyes following him. Later that morning, Mark drove to the small community office to check something important. He wanted to be sure. He asked for copies of the rules and ownership records. The staff member there was friendly and calm. There is no shared use rule for private cabins, the staff member said. Your ownership is clear. You did nothing wrong. Mark felt relieved, but also curious. Does Linda work here? The staff member paused. She used to volunteer years ago. She has no authority now. That explained a lot. When Mark returned to the cabin, a note was taped to his door. The paper was folded neatly, but the message was sharp. It said he was breaking community tradition and causing trouble. It warned him to be careful. Mark sighed. He removed the note and placed it inside. He did not feel afraid. He felt annoyed. He had followed every rule. Still, someone was trying to push him out. That afternoon, a man named Paul, who lived 2 cabins down, stopped by. Paul was older, with a calm face and steady voice. I heard what happened last night, Paul said. Mark nodded. I did not expect it. Paul smiled slightly. Linda has done this before. She tries to control what she does not own. Why does no one stop her? Mark asked. People avoid conflict, Paul replied. They give in because it feels easier. Mark looked toward the lake. I do not plan to give in. Paul nodded. Good. If you need witnesses, many of us are willing to speak. That gave Mark confidence. He was not alone. That evening, Mark received an email from the homeowners group. It said there would be a special meeting the next day about community behavior. Linda's name was listed as the one who requested it. Mark understood what that meant. She wanted to pressure him publicly. The next day, the meeting room was full. Neighbors filled the chairs. Some looked curious. Others looked uncomfortable. Linda sat in the front, arms crossed, looking ready. The head of the group opened the meeting calmly. We are here to discuss recent complaints. Linda stood immediately. This man is refusing to respect our community traditions. Mark waited. Linda continued, speaking loudly. Certain cabins have always been shared during special weekends. He is selfish. Mark stood slowly. I respect the community. I also respect the law. He placed copies of his ownership papers on the table. There is no shared cabin rule. I checked. The room grew quiet. The head of the group reviewed the documents. This is correct. The cabin is private property. Linda shook her head. That is not fair. Fairness follows the rules, the head replied. Several neighbors began to speak up. Paul stood. Linda has pressured people before. This is not new. Another neighbor nodded. She tried the same thing with my place last year. Murmurs spread through the room. Linda's confidence began to crack. You are all turning against me. No, the head said firmly. We are correcting behavior. The group voted. A warning was issued to Linda for false claims and misuse of authority. Linda left the room quickly, her face tight with anger. Mark felt a mix of relief and concern. He won the meeting, but he knew something else. People like Linda did not forget public embarrassment. That night, Mark locked his door and sat quietly. He looked around his cabin. He had worked too hard to lose it. Outside, the trees moved gently in the wind. The lake reflected the moon once again. Mark promised himself one thing. He would protect what was his. And if Linda tried again, he would be ready. The next few days passed quietly, but the silence felt heavy. Mark stayed at the cabin longer than planned. He worked remotely during the day and walked near the lake in the evenings. On the surface, everything looked normal. Inside the community, tension slowly grew. Linda did not show herself. Her house stayed dark at night, and her car was rarely seen. Some neighbors thought she had accepted the decision. Mark did not believe that. People like Linda did not accept being corrected so easily. On the fourth morning, Mark noticed something strange. When he stepped outside, a bright orange notice was posted near the road. It said that unauthorized construction was reported in the area and inspections would begin soon. Mark frowned. He had not built anything. He checked his property carefully. Everything was the same. Later that day, Paul stopped by again. Did you see the notice? Paul asked. Yes, Mark said. I do not understand it. Paul lowered his voice. Linda requested it. Mark felt his patience tested. On what grounds? She claimed you changed the cabin structure, Paul said. No proof, just words. Mark shook his head slowly. She is trying to scare me. And the problem, Paul added, is that inspections can delay things. Even if you are right. Mark decided to act before rumors turned into trouble. He contacted the local inspection office directly. He invited them to visit his cabin. 2 days later, an inspector arrived. He was calm and professional. He walked around the cabin, took notes, and checked records. There are no violations here, the inspector said. Everything matches the permit history. Mark thanked him and asked for written confirmation. He received it the same day. That should have ended things. But it did not. That evening, a message spread through the community group. Linda claimed the inspection was rushed and unfair. She questioned the inspector's honesty. Some neighbors began to feel uncomfortable again. Mark realized something important. Linda was not fighting about rules. She was fighting for control. The following weekend, a community event was planned near the lake. Mark usually avoided gatherings, but this time he decided to attend. He wanted people to see him as a neighbor, not a stranger. The event was simple. Food tables, small talk, children running near the water. Mark greeted people politely. Slowly, conversations felt easier. Then Linda arrived. She walked straight through the crowd, stopping near Mark. Her smile was tight. Enjoying the community, she asked loudly. Yes, Mark replied calmly. That is why I am here. Linda looked around. It would be better if everyone followed tradition. Mark met her eyes. Tradition should not break rules. People nearby listened quietly. Linda raised her voice. You are changing how things work here. Mark kept his tone steady. I am living by the rules that already exist. Paul stepped closer. Enough, he said. This is not the place. Linda turned away, clearly angry. That night, Mark found trash scattered near his porch. Food wrappers and empty bottles lay on the ground. He knew it was not an accident. Instead of reacting, Mark cleaned it calmly. Then he placed a small camera facing the porch, following local guidelines. He wanted facts, not arguments. 2 nights later, the camera recorded someone near the cabin. The figure was unclear, but the movement was intentional. The person dropped trash again and walked away. Mark did not rush. He waited. The next night, the camera captured a clear image. It was Linda. Mark felt disappointed, not angry. He collected the footage and went to the community office. The head of the group watched the recording carefully. "This is serious," he said. A formal complaint was filed. Linda was called in for review. The meeting was quiet and tense. Linda denied everything at first. When shown the footage, she went silent. "This behavior violates community conduct rules," the head said. "There will be consequences." Linda stood up suddenly. "You are all against me." "No," Paul said calmly. "You did this to yourself." Linda left without another word. After that, things changed. Linda stopped attending events. Her influence faded quickly. People no longer feared speaking up. Mark returned to his routine. Mornings by the lake. Evenings on the porch. The quiet felt real again. One afternoon, Paul visited with 2 other neighbors. They thanked Mark for standing firm. "You reminded people that rules protect everyone," one said. Mark smiled. "I just wanted peace." As the sun set, Mark looked at the water. He knew the fight was not just about a cabin. It was about respect. And for the first time since arriving, he felt truly at home. After the complaint meeting, the community felt different. The air around Pine Hollow Lake seemed lighter, but also uncertain. People greeted each other more openly, yet many still watched their words. Mark noticed the change during his morning walks. Neighbors smiled more, but they also looked relieved, as if a long pressure had finally eased. Linda stayed quiet for several weeks. Her house remained closed, curtains drawn. Some people thought she might move away. Others believed she was waiting. Mark did not try to guess. He focused on his routine and his work. One afternoon, Mark received an official letter from the homeowners group. It thanked him for cooperating during the recent issues and confirmed that his property rights were fully protected. It also stated that any future complaints against him would require written proof before action. Mark folded the letter carefully and placed it in his folder. It felt like a shield made of paper, but it mattered. That same day, a storm rolled in. Dark clouds gathered over the lake, and the wind grew strong. Mark secured his porch furniture and checked the windows. Rain began to fall heavily, pounding the roof and turning paths into streams. During the storm, the power went out across the area. The community relied on shared lines, and repairs often took time. Mark lit a lamp and waited. He was used to quiet nights, even dark ones. Late that evening, he heard a knock on the door. Mark paused. Visitors were rare during storms. He opened the door carefully. Paul stood there, soaked from the rain. "Sorry to bother you," Paul said. Linda's place lost power completely. Her backup failed. Mark listened quietly. "She is asking neighbors for help," Paul continued. "No one feels comfortable going alone." Mark understood what Paul was really asking. He took a moment, then nodded. "I will come." They walked together through the rain. Linda's house looked dim and cold. When she opened the door, her expression changed. Pride mixed with discomfort. "I did not expect you," Linda said. Mark kept his voice neutral. "We are neighbors." Inside, the house was dark. Mark checked the backup system and found a simple connection issue. He fixed it quickly. The lights returned. Linda watched silently. "Thank you," she said finally. The words sounded heavy. "You should have this checked properly," Mark replied. "Storms can damage old systems." She nodded. Mark left without saying more. The next morning, word spread quickly. People noticed something important. Mark had helped Linda even after everything she had done. That act shifted the mood in the community. A few days later, the homeowners group announced another meeting. This time, the topic was community trust and leadership behavior. The meeting room filled again, but the feeling was different. There was no anger, only seriousness. Linda attended. She sat quietly, not in the front. The head of the group spoke clearly. Recent events have shown that power must be used responsibly. We are updating our guidelines. New rules were presented. No individual could claim authority without written roll approval. Complaints required evidence. Repeated false reports would lead to penalties. The vote passed easily. Then Linda stood up. "I want to say something," she said. The room grew silent. "I believed I was protecting tradition," Linda said slowly. "But I crossed lines." She paused, then looked toward Mark. "I was wrong." Mark did not respond. He simply nodded once. Linda continued. "I will step away from community roles completely." She sat down. The meeting ended quietly. People left in small groups, talking softly. Outside, Paul walked beside Mark. "That took courage," he said. Mark shrugged. "I just stayed calm." Weeks passed. Summer moved in. The lake filled with sunlight and warmth. The community felt stable again. Linda kept her word. She stayed distant but respectful. No more notes. No more claims. One evening, Mark sat on his porch watching the water. He thought about how close he had come to losing his peace, not because of rules, but because of fear. Standing firm had not been easy. Staying calm had been harder. But it worked. The cabin remained quiet, just as he wanted. And this time, the quiet felt strong. Summer slowly reached its peak at Pine Hollow Lake. The trees were full and green, the water warm under the sun, and the days felt long and gentle. For the first time since buying the cabin, Mark felt fully relaxed. The trouble that once followed him seemed far away. Mark had decided to stay the entire season. He worked in the mornings and spent his evenings outside. Sometimes he fished. Sometimes he just sat and watched the water. The cabin finally felt like home, not just a place he owned. The community also felt changed. Neighbors talked more openly. Small gatherings became common. People waved and stopped to chat. Fear and silence were gone. Linda stayed quiet. She kept to herself and followed the rules carefully. She no longer tried to guide others or control situations. Some people believed she had learned. Others believed she had simply lost interest. Mark did not spend time thinking about it. One afternoon, the homeowners group announced a lake cleanup day. Everyone was invited. Tools and gloves were provided. It was meant to be a simple activity, but it carried meaning. Working together again mattered. Mark joined early. He helped clear fallen branches and clean the shoreline. Paul worked beside him, joking lightly. "You changed more than you realize," Paul said. "I did not plan to," Mark replied. "I only wanted fairness." "That is usually how change starts," Paul said. As the day went on, Linda arrived. She took gloves and joined a small group near the water. She worked quietly, without complaint. When she passed Mark, she stopped. "I wanted to thank you again," Linda said. "For the storm night. And for not pushing when you could have." Mark nodded. "We all make mistakes." Linda looked at the lake. "I forgot that rules exist to protect people, not control them." Mark did not reply, but he understood the meaning. By evening, the lake looked cleaner than it had in years. People gathered near the dock, sharing food and stories. Laughter filled the air. That night, Mark sat alone on his porch. He thought about how close he had come to giving up. It would have been easier to leave. Easier to avoid conflict. But walking away would have meant losing something important. Standing firm had protected more than his cabin. It protected his peace. Weeks later, Mark received news that surprised him. The homeowners group offered him a small advisory role. They wanted someone calm and fair. Someone who respected rules without abusing them. Mark declined politely. "I prefer staying quiet," he said. "Others should lead." They respected his choice. Autumn slowly approached. The air cooled, and leaves began to change color. Mark prepared to return to the city full-time, but something felt different now. He was not escaping to the cabin anymore. He was returning to it. On his last weekend of the season, Mark invited Paul and a few neighbors for a simple dinner. Nothing fancy. Just food and shared time. As the sun set, Paul raised a glass of juice. "To peace," he said. "And to standing firm without anger." Everyone agreed. Later that night, when the guests had gone, Mark walked down to the lake. The water was still. The reflection of the sky shimmered gently. He realized something important. Peace was not found by avoiding problems. It was built by facing them calmly. The cabin remained where it always had been. Quiet. Strong. Waiting. And Mark knew that no matter who came or what was demanded, this place would always be his. Not because he fought, but because he stood steady.